The restaurant was lively that evening. The soft hum of conversations mixed with the clinking of cutlery, and the faint sound of music playing in the background made the space feel welcoming. It was a busy night, one of those evenings where every server had to move quickly, attending to guests while keeping everything organized. Among them was a young waitress, still fairly new, but passionate about her work. She liked the job despite its challenges. Serving people, seeing their smiles, hearing their thanks, it gave her a sense of satisfaction that no money could buy. That night, a couple arrived who immediately caught everyone's attention. The man was sharply dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, moving with a quiet confidence that made him seem larger than life. The woman beside him carried herself like someone used to being noticed. Her dress was elegant, her hair perfect, and the way she looked around made people feel as though she was evaluating them. They were shown to a table in a prime corner of the restaurant. The young waitress felt a flutter of nerves when she approached them. There was something about them, a presence that made the room feel smaller and more tense. She greeted them politely, handed them menus, and explained the specials with a warm smile. She tried to stay calm, repeating herself if needed, answering their questions carefully. The couple hardly acknowledged her, focusing intently on the menu as if she didn't exist. The young waitress noticed the woman's eyes narrowing at her explanations. She forced herself to breathe, reminding herself to stay professional and collected, even though her heart was racing. When it came time to take their order, the waitress had to pay extra attention. Each dish had modifications and special requests. She repeated the details in her mind to ensure nothing was forgotten. The kitchen was busy, but she trusted the staff. They were skilled and used to high-pressure situations. She handed over the tickets and watched as the chefs moved efficiently to prepare the food. When the dishes were ready, she carefully carried them to the table. She balanced the plates, trying to make sure nothing spilled. The man nodded slightly, a brief acknowledgement of her service, but the woman frowned immediately. The mistake was small. The sauce on one dish had been placed slightly off-center, but it was enough to make the woman's expression sour. She looked sharply at the waitress, and the young woman's stomach dropped. She whispered an apology, hoping it would be enough that the woman was not satisfied. She leaned forward, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear, criticizing the waitress for the minor mistake. Every word felt like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. She tried to explain, promising to fix the dish immediately, but the woman waved her off and continued to speak harshly. Other guests glanced at the table, some whispering quietly, others averting their eyes, uncomfortable with the confrontation. The warmth and buzz of the restaurant seemed to fade, replaced by a tense heaviness around that corner table. Then, unexpectedly, the woman's anger became physical. She lightly slapped the waitress on the arm. It wasn't a strong slap, but it was enough to shock everyone present. Gasps filled the room, and the young waitress froze. Her face flushed with humiliation, and she felt tears threatening to fall. She wanted to defend herself, to speak, but the words wouldn't come. For a moment, it felt as though the restaurant had stopped, leaving only the sting of the slap and the harsh words lingering in the air. The man beside her did nothing. He leaned back in his chair, watching the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. The woman continued to speak sharply, pointing out every imagined flaw and mistake. The young waitress tried to stay calm, apologizing again with a trembling voice. She promised to correct the mistake immediately, hoping it would end the confrontation, but the woman ignored her entirely. She felt trapped, unsure how to act without making the situation worse. Her mind raced. She thought of all the shifts she had worked, all the times she had stayed late, gone the extra mile for guests, and handled difficult situations with patience. She could not understand why one small mistake had led to this humiliation. She wanted to disappear, to hide behind the counter and escape the sharp eyes and words of the woman. She reminded herself to breathe, focusing on what she could control, staying calm, staying professional. Other staff members watched silently. They exchanged supportive glances, but no one intervened. Confronting such powerful guests could have consequences, they knew. The young waitress returned to the kitchen, hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the dish. She repositioned the sauce carefully, making it exactly as requested, and carried it back to the table, trying to steady her nerves with every step. As she served the corrected dish. The woman's expression softened only a little. The man remained indifferent, still observing from his chair. The young waitress forced a polite smile, hiding the mix of anger, sadness, and exhaustion she felt inside. She refilled glasses, cleared empty plates, and answered questions carefully. Every action was measured, precise. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down, but she refused to let it break her professionalism. While moving around the table, she noticed the woman's sense of entitlement. The way she expected everyone to obey without question made the young waitress feel small, yet it also sparked a quiet determination. She reminded herself that she had done nothing wrong, and that she deserved respect, no matter how others behaved. The rest of the evening continued in tense precision. Every step she took was careful. Every word she spoke measured. The young waitress was exhausted, but she pushed herself to remain professional. Finally, the couple finished their meal. She brought the bill, handled the payment carefully, and maintained her polite smile. The woman paid without a word, and they left as quietly as they had arrived. Relief washed over the young waitress, but so did a lingering sadness. The humiliation had left its mark. Returning to her station, she received small nods of encouragement from fellow staff members. They didn't speak, but their silent support was comforting. She wiped down tables, refilled condiments, and served other guests, trying to shift her focus back to her job. Difficult customers were part of the work, she reminded herself. But this evening had tested her patience and confidence like never before. Unnoticed by her, someone at a nearby table had witnessed the entire incident. They had seen everything, the harsh words, the slap, and the way she had handled herself under pressure. They noticed her quiet dignity and the injustice she endured. Although she did not know it yet, this observer would play a role in what happened next, ensuring that her courage and composure were not ignored. As the restaurant began to empty, the young waitress finished her shift. She felt exhausted, but also proud. Despite the humiliation, she had maintained her professionalism and composure. She cleaned her station, organized orders, and took a deep breath, reminding herself that her worth was not defined by someone else's cruelty. The night settled into a calm quiet, yet the memory of the incident lingered, a reminder of both the cruelty of some and the strength within her. This evening would mark the start of a story far from over, and she had already faced it with courage she hadn't known she possessed. The morning after the incident, the young waitress arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual. Her body still ached from the long shift, and her mind was heavy with the memory of the previous night. The humiliation she had endured, twisting in her chest every time she thought about it. She poured herself a cup of coffee and took a quiet moment before the shift began, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She reminded herself that she had done nothing wrong, that she had remained professional under pressure, but the sting of the slap and the sharp words still made her shiver. The restaurant had already started to fill with the early lunch crowd. Servers were moving quickly, balancing plates and taking orders with practiced efficiency. Despite her lingering thoughts, the young waitress threw herself into her work. She greeted customers with her usual smile, took orders carefully, and made sure every table was looked after. Her coworkers noticed her slightly distracted demeanor, but gave her encouraging nods and quiet support, knowing she had gone through a difficult night. Meanwhile, The woman and the man from the previous night were far from forgotten. The young waitress had tried to put the incident behind her, but as the day went on, she realized that it had left a mark, not just on her pride, but on the way she approached her job. Every guest she served seemed to remind her of the couple, making her move with extra caution, checking and double-checking everything she did. The anxiety lingered beneath the surface, though she tried to hide it behind her professionalism. Unknown to her, the person who had witnessed the slap last night had not forgotten either. That silent observer had gone home and considered what they had seen carefully. They were a person of influence, someone accustomed to power and the responsibility that came with it. Their thoughts returned to the young waitress repeatedly. She had handled herself with dignity, despite being publicly humiliated, and that resilience had not gone unnoticed. By the afternoon, they had decided that the incident required action, but not in anger or confrontation. They wanted to see how the situation could be addressed fairly, respecting everyone involved. Back at the restaurant, the young waitress continued her shift. Each time she carried a tray, she reminded herself to breathe and focus. She noticed small gestures from the guests, a kind smile, a patient question, a simple thank you. These moments helped her regain some of the confidence that had been shaken the night before. She realized that her work was valued by many, even if one unpleasant incident had tried to make her doubt herself. Still, the humiliation weighed heavily, and she found herself replaying the events in her mind. Why had the woman felt the need to act that way? Why had the man done nothing to intervene? Questions swirled, unanswered, and made her feel small dot as the lunch crowd began to thin. A manager approached her quietly. "I wanted to check on you," they said gently. "I noticed last night was rough. You handled yourself well?" The young waitress gave a faint smile, grateful for the reassurance. It felt good to know that someone understood and appreciated the effort it took to remain calm under pressure. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't want to make things worse." The manager nodded. "You didn't. You did exactly what was needed. Keep your head up." That simple encouragement lifted some of the weight from her shoulders. By the afternoon, the observer from the previous night returned to the restaurant. They requested to speak with the manager privately. The manager explained what had happened and showed them the security footage. Watching it confirmed everything they had witnessed: the woman's behavior, the young waitress's composure, and the man's indifference. The observer's expression was calm, but their mind was made up. The waitress had shown strength, respect, and professionalism, and it was clear that the couple's actions had crossed a line. They decided to take steps to address the incident in a way that would protect the young waitress and ensure that such behavior would not be repeated. Meanwhile, the young waitress continued her duties, unaware that change was coming. She served customers with care, refilled drinks, cleared plates, and answered questions with patience. She noticed a few coworkers watching her, their eyes filled with quiet admiration. The observer had not yet revealed themselves, but their presence was near. The young waitress had no idea that someone influential was taking note of her every movement, quietly planning the next steps to address the injustice she had endured. By the end of the afternoon, the restaurant began to empty, leaving only a few late diners. The young waitress took a moment to catch her breath, wiping down tables and refilling condiments. Her mind wandered back to the incident, but she also felt a strange sense of anticipation, though she didn't know why. Something was about to happen, though she had no idea what. The observer had decided that the time for quiet watching had ended. Action was necessary, and the young waitress would soon see that her resilience and professionalism had not gone unnoticed. As she prepared to leave for the day, the manager approached her once more. "I have someone who wants to speak with you," they said. Confused but curious, she followed the manager to a small office at the back. There, sitting calmly, was the person who had witnessed the entire incident the night before. They introduced themselves, explaining their position and their connection to the restaurant. The young waitress listened carefully, still unsure of what to expect. The person spoke with kindness and clarity, acknowledging the difficulty of the situation she had faced and praising the dignity with which she had handled herself. The conversation left her feeling a mixture of relief and hope. For the first time since the incident, she felt seen and respected. The observer assured her that the matter would be addressed and that the restaurant valued her and her dedication. The young waitress felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She realized that her professionalism, her courage, and her calm demeanor had made a difference. The humiliation from the previous night had not gone unnoticed, and there were people willing to stand behind her dot as she left the office. A sense of quiet determination settled over her. She knew that challenges would come in any job, but she also knew that she could handle them with grace and strength. The experience had tested her, but it had also shown her that dignity and professionalism were powerful tools. She returned to her station, ready to face whatever the next shift would bring, with the knowledge that she was not alone and that her worth was recognized. The events of that evening and the day that followed would remain in her mind. A reminder that even in moments of unfairness and humiliation, strength and resilience could shine through. The next day, the restaurant opened with the usual hum of activity. The young waitress arrived early, her thoughts still tangled with the events of the previous night. She felt a mix of nervousness and cautious hope. Something had shifted, though she didn't yet know exactly what. Pouring herself a cup of coffee, she watched the quiet before the lunch crowd arrived, trying to steady her racing heart. The memory of the slap and the harsh words still lingered, but she reminded herself that she had handled the situation with dignity, and that mattered more than the humiliation she had endured. The morning moved forward, and customers began trickling in. She moved from table to table, taking orders carefully, refilling drinks, and checking on guests with her usual polite smile. Each time she approached a table, she felt a tiny bit stronger. The previous night had shaken her confidence, but she was determined not to let it define her. Some of her coworkers noticed her quiet focus and gave her encouraging glances or small words of support. Their gestures, though subtle, reminded her that she wasn't alone, that people around her cared. Midway through the morning, the manager approached her with a serious expression. "Someone important is coming today," he said quietly. "You might recognize him. He wants to meet you personally and see how things run here." Her stomach tightened. Important? Recognize him? She had no idea what to expect. Her mind ran through possibilities, none of which felt comfortable. She nodded, forcing herself to remain calm. Whatever was coming, she would handle it like she always did, carefully, professionally, and with patience. A short time later, a sleek car pulled up outside, and a man stepped into the restaurant. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly fitted suit, and carried an air of quiet authority that made the room feel instantly more formal. The manager greeted him respectfully and led him toward her. The young waitress immediately recognized him. He was the person who had watched everything unfold the night before. The observer. He had seen her treated unfairly and had noted the way she remained calm. She felt a mixture of awe, nervousness, and curiosity. He extended his hand politely and introduced himself, speaking in a calm, measured voice. He explained that he was the owner of the restaurant and that he had been informed about the incident from the previous night. He had reviewed the security footage and wanted to meet the young waitress in person. His gaze was steady and kind, giving her an immediate sense of respect and reassurance. He praised her for the way she had handled an incredibly difficult situation, noting her professionalism and composure. The young waitress felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time since the incident, she felt genuinely seen. The owner then asked her to tell her side of the story. She recounted the events carefully, describing the couple's behavior and how she had tried to remain professional despite the verbal and physical humiliation. She spoke honestly, but without anger, focusing on facts and the steps she had taken to manage the situation. He listened intently, nodding, asking gentle questions to clarify details. His calm, attentive demeanor made her feel valued. She realized that for the first time, someone with real authority was acknowledging her courage and the challenges she had faced. After she finished, he thanked her sincerely and reassured her that the situation would be addressed. He emphasized that no employee should ever be humiliated or disrespected, and that everyone in his restaurant, regardless of who they were, would be held to that standard. Hearing these words, the young waitress felt a deep sense of validation. The humiliation of the previous night would not be ignored, and someone with real power had taken notice. He asked her to continue her duties normally, as he wanted to observe the restaurant's operations from the staff's perspective. Returning to her tasks, she moved through tables with careful attention, balancing trays, taking orders, and answering questions. She felt a renewed sense of responsibility, but also a quiet confidence, knowing that the owner himself was watching and that he appreciated her dedication, gave her an unexpected but welcome sense of empowerment. Throughout the afternoon, she noticed subtle changes in the restaurant's atmosphere. The staff seemed more focused, more careful, and more respectful toward one another. It was as if the owner's presence, along with his knowledge of the previous night's events, had reminded everyone of the standards expected. She realized that her own behavior, the way she had handled the couple, was setting an example. Even without realizing it, her professionalism was influencing the people around her. Later, the owner called her aside again. He explained that he intended to speak directly with the couple from the night before. Their behavior had been unacceptable, and he wanted to ensure they understood the consequences of their actions. He made it clear that every staff member's dignity mattered, and that no one would be subjected to public humiliation. The young waitress felt a mixture of relief. Had ripple effects far beyond the initial incident, affecting everyone who worked there and shaping the culture of the restaurant itself. As she left the restaurant, she thought about the growth she had experienced. She had faced fear, humiliation, and uncertainty, yet she had emerged stronger. She had learned that maintaining dignity, even in the face of cruelty, was powerful. She had learned that her actions could influence others, and that recognition from those in authority could transform difficult experiences into moments of empowerment. Most importantly, she had learned that courage was not just about standing up in the moment. It was about remaining true to oneself, acting with integrity, and holding on to dignity no matter the circumstances. With that realization, she stepped into the night with a quiet but profound confidence. The experience that had once seemed like a moment of defeat had become a turning point, teaching her resilience, professionalism, and the power of self-respect. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had grown stronger, wiser, and more capable than she had ever imagined. The restaurant, the people she worked with, and even the challenging guests had all contributed to a lesson that she would carry for the rest of her life. And in that moment, walking home with her head held high, she understood that strength and dignity were not just personal qualities. They were forces that could change the world around her. One small interaction at a time. The morning after the couple had left, the restaurant felt different. There was a calm confidence in the air, a sense that balance had been restored. The young waitress arrived early, as usual, but this time she carried a quiet sense of pride. The events of the past few days had been challenging, exhausting, and at times humiliating, but they had also shown her the strength she didn't always realize she possessed. She poured herself a cup of coffee and took a moment to reflect. What had once felt like a personal defeat now seemed like a test she had passed with courage and dignity. As the lunch crowd began to arrive, She moved through the tables with ease. Each interaction, each smile, each polite exchange felt lighter than before. Her coworkers noticed it too. Some gave her small nods, others whispered words of encouragement, and a few even smiled knowingly, as if they understood the weight she had carried and the victory she had quietly won. The young waitress realized that her actions over the past few days had done more than protect her dignity. They had influenced the culture of the restaurant, creating a space where professionalism and respect mattered. Midway through the morning, the owner approached her once again. He spoke quietly, but with the same calm authority he had shown from the beginning. "I want to officially thank you," he said. "What happened was unfortunate, but the way you handled it shows the kind of strength and professionalism we value. You've set an example for everyone here." She felt a surge of gratitude. Hearing such recognition directly from someone with real authority was a validation she had never expected. She smiled, feeling both relieved and proud. The owner then asked her if she had any thoughts or suggestions about improving the work environment. The young waitress paused, considering her words. She spoke honestly, sharing ideas about support among staff, clear communication, and handling difficult customers with firmness and professionalism. The owner listened intently, nodding. His attention showed her that her voice mattered, not just her work, but her insights and opinions. It was a reminder that respect was a two-way street. It was earned not only through resilience, but also by speaking up and contributing constructively. Later that afternoon, the couple attempted to return. This time, however, they were met with a polite but firm boundary. The owner addressed them directly, calmly, but decisively, making it clear that disrespectful behavior would not be tolerated. The young waitress served them as she always had, professional and composed, but now she noticed that the couple was subdued, aware that their previous behavior had consequences. The balance of power had shifted completely. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her dignity had been defended not through confrontation, but through patience, resilience, and the support of someone in authority. Throughout the day, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. She realized that courage wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it was staying calm under pressure, maintaining dignity when others tried to take it away, and trusting that the right people would see and value her strength. She understood that setbacks, humiliation, and challenges were not the end. They were opportunities to demonstrate who she truly was. And she had proven both to herself and to those around her that she could rise above cruelty and injustice. By the evening, the restaurant was filled with regular patrons. She moved efficiently from table to table, attentive to every guest, smiling politely, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Her confidence was noticeable, though not boastful. She had found a rhythm in which she could be strong and professional, without needing to prove anything to anyone. The lessons of the past days had changed her, but in a way that felt natural and empowering. She had grown without losing her humility, her kindness, or her dedication. As she finished her shift and prepared to leave, the owner approached once more. "You've done exceptionally well," he said, "not just in handling the difficult situation, but in showing leadership through professionalism. I want you to know that this restaurant values you and that you're an important part of this team." The young waitress felt tears prick at the corner of her eyes. She had never expected to hear such affirmation. Her heart swelled with pride, not arrogance, but the quiet pride of someone who had faced fear, injustice, and humiliation and had emerged stronger. Walking home that night, she reflected on the journey she had been through. What had begun as a moment of embarrassment and fear had transformed into a lesson in resilience, professionalism, and self-respect. She understood now that true strength wasn't just about standing up in the moment. It was about remaining composed, maintaining dignity, and trusting that justice and recognition could follow in their own time. She felt empowered. Knowing that she had done exactly that. The young waitress also realized that her growth had ripple effects. Her coworkers had seen her handle the situation. The owner had recognized her courage, and even the guests had noticed the shift in her confidence. She had not only protected herself, she had influenced the environment around her, setting a standard for respect, professionalism, and integrity. She felt grateful for the support she had received and proud of the calm strength she had maintained on her own. By the next day, the restaurant felt like a new place. The tension that had hung over the staff was gone, replaced by a sense of mutual respect and awareness. The young waitress moved through her tasks with a quiet confidence, no longer anxious about difficult guests or potential humiliation. She knew that she had the backing of someone in authority who valued her, and she understood the power of her own composure. The lessons of the past days would stay with her, shaping not only her career, but her approach to challenges in life. In the weeks that followed, the young waitress noticed subtle changes. Her colleagues treated one another with more respect. The staff worked together more smoothly, and even difficult customers were handled with clear boundaries and professionalism. She realized that her quiet courage had contributed to this positive shift. She had faced cruelty and adversity, and instead of letting it defeat her, she had used it as an opportunity to demonstrate resilience and professionalism. Her actions had set an example and influenced the culture around her. The young waitress often thought back to that night, the slap, and the humiliation she had faced. She no longer felt anger or fear when remembering it. Instead, she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had survived, yes, but more importantly, she had grown stronger, more confident, and more self-assured. She had learned that dignity, composure, and professionalism could be more powerful than any harsh word or cruel action. She had proven to herself that her worth was not defined by the actions of others, but by the integrity she maintained in every moment. And as she continued her life, both inside and outside the restaurant, she carried with her the lessons of those days. She knew that challenges would come again, but she also knew that she had the strength, patience, and resilience to face them. She had experienced a test of character, and she had emerged not only unbroken, but empowered. The young waitress walked into her future with a quiet confidence, a strong sense of self-worth, and the knowledge that courage, dignity, and professionalism could turn even the most difficult moments into opportunities for growth and recognition. In the end, what had seemed like a cruel, humiliating moment became the very thing that allowed her to see her own strength. She had endured, she had been recognized, and she had inspired others through her calm, steady example. And with that understanding, she moved forward stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life would bring next. And pride. The events of the previous night, though painful, had led to an important change. Someone with authority was taking action. He shared a few personal stories about times he had seen staff treated unfairly in the past, and how he had learned to address such situations. His calm, deliberate words made her feel reassured and motivated. She realized that respect and fairness were not just ideals. They were principles that he actively enforced. The young waitress felt inspired. She understood that her own courage in handling a difficult situation had been recognized and would influence the outcome. As the evening approached, the restaurant filled with dinner guests. She moved efficiently, serving orders, clearing plates, and managing multiple tables at once. Her movements were precise, her attention to detail sharp. Though she was still aware of the previous night's incident, she no longer felt anxious or powerless. Instead, she felt strong and capable, bolstered by the knowledge that someone influential had her back. Her confidence was quiet but powerful. During a brief lull, the owner came over and spoke to her again. "I want you to know that your professionalism has not gone unnoticed," he said. "What happened last night was unfortunate, but your response was exemplary. You've set a standard for everyone here." The young waitress smiled, grateful and slightly overwhelmed by the acknowledgement. It was rare to feel recognized in such a meaningful way. She thanked him sincerely, feeling her confidence grow with every word. Later that night, the couple from the previous evening arrived again. This time, the atmosphere was different. The owner was present, and his calm authority had shifted the energy in the room. The couple's usual arrogance seemed diminished in comparison. The young waitress approached their table, as always polite and professional, but now she carried a quiet strength and confidence. She served them efficiently, answering questions calmly, without allowing the memory of the previous night to affect her. Throughout the evening, she noticed small gestures from the owner, a nod, a subtle smile, or a quiet word of encouragement. These gestures reinforced her confidence and reminded her that she was valued and respected. Her actions, combined with the owner's presence, had changed the dynamic. The young waitress felt proud, not just for enduring the previous ordeal, but for showing courage and composure in the face of unfair treatment. By the end of the night, the restaurant quieted down. She cleaned her station and prepared to leave, her mind filled with a mixture of exhaustion and pride. The events of the previous night, which had begun as a source of humiliation, had transformed into an opportunity for recognition, growth, and empowerment. She had faced an incredibly difficult situation, and her professionalism and dignity had been acknowledged by someone with real authority. As she walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air, she reflected on how far she had come. She understood that challenges would continue to arise in her career, but now she had confidence, experience, and support that would help her face them. The events of the night before and the following day had left a lasting impression. She realized that her courage, resilience, and professionalism were powerful tools, and that even in the face of cruelty, she could maintain her dignity and be recognized for it. With each step away from the restaurant, she felt stronger and more capable. The humiliation she had once feared would define her now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the respect, validation, and confidence she had earned. She was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that her actions mattered, her dignity was intact, and her strength had been recognized. The night had started as a test, but it had become a moment of transformation, proving that resilience, professionalism, and courage could overcome even the most challenging situations. The next morning, the young waitress arrived at the restaurant, feeling a mix of anticipation and calm. The previous night's events had left her exhausted, but also proud. She knew that her dignity had been noticed, that her courage had been acknowledged, and that things were beginning to change. As she stepped inside, the familiar scent of the kitchen and the hum of early preparations brought her a sense of comfort. This was her workplace, a space she loved despite the challenges it sometimes brought. Today, however, felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air, one that suggested change was coming. As she adjusted her apron and checked her station, the manager approached her quietly. "You might notice some guests arriving soon," he said softly. "They're coming to discuss last night's events. The owner wants everything handled carefully." Her heart skipped a beat. The couple from the previous evening? She had expected to avoid them, but it seemed the situation was about to reach a resolution. She nodded, swallowing her nerves. Whatever happened next, she reminded herself, she would remain professional, composed, and focused on her work. By mid-morning, the restaurant began to fill with the usual crowd, but the couple soon arrived again. This time, the atmosphere was markedly different. The owner was present, observing from a discreet distance, and his calm authority seemed to fill the room. The couple's earlier arrogance was replaced by cautious politeness, their confidence subdued. It was clear that they were aware of the consequences of their previous behavior. The young waitress noticed the subtle shift and felt a surge of quiet relief. The dynamic had changed. and she could finally serve them without the cloud of fear and humiliation that had hung over her the night before. As she approached their table, her movements were calm and precise. She greeted them politely, took their orders efficiently, and carried their dishes with care. Each interaction was handled with professionalism and dignity. She noticed that the woman seemed to hesitate before speaking, no longer the sharp, critical presence she had been the night before. The man also appeared subdued, as though he had realized that their behavior would not be tolerated. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. The young waitress felt a sense of quiet empowerment. Throughout the day, the owner remained observant. He occasionally nodded to her, offering subtle signs of support and acknowledgement. She felt a growing confidence with each interaction, realizing that the respect she had earned was not just symbolic, it was real. Her composure and professionalism had set a standard, one that the staff and the guests now recognized. Even her coworkers seemed more attentive, more respectful, and more willing to support one another. The energy in the restaurant had shifted, becoming stronger, calmer, and more cooperative. During a brief pause between orders, the owner approached her. "I want you to know that what you did last night mattered," he said quietly. "Your calm and dignity under pressure showed real strength. That is exactly the kind of professionalism we value here." The young waitress felt a warmth in her chest. She had faced humiliation, yet her response had led to recognition and respect. She thanked him quietly, feeling a deep sense of pride. His words reinforced the idea that her actions had consequences, that her courage could influence more than just her own experience. As the afternoon wore on, the couple finally spoke with the owner privately. Though the young waitress could only catch glimpses of the conversation, she noticed their expressions change from defensiveness to realization. The owner's calm authority and measured words seemed to have an impact. She felt a quiet satisfaction. She had maintained her dignity and had not allowed their cruelty to define her. Now, the couple was being made aware of the effects of their behavior, and the power dynamic had shifted decisively in her favor. When the couple left later that afternoon, the young waitress felt an overwhelming sense of relief. She had endured the worst of the humiliation and had emerged with her confidence intact. The respect she had earned from the owner and her coworkers was now firmly established. She realized that her perseverance and professionalism had not only protected her dignity, but had also inspired others around her. She felt stronger, more capable, and ready for any challenge that might come next. In the quiet moments following their departure, she reflected on what had happened. The slap, the criticism, and the fear had once seemed unbearable. But now, in hindsight, they had become the catalyst for change. She had faced the cruelty of the world and had not let it break her. Instead, she had proven that resilience, dignity, and professionalism could stand firm even in the most difficult circumstances. It was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. By the end of her shift, the young waitress was exhausted, yet she felt an undeniable sense of accomplishment. She had navigated a difficult situation with strength, composure, and intelligence. She had been acknowledged by someone in power, and she had seen the consequences of maintaining dignity in the face of disrespect. Walking out into the cool evening air, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that challenges would come, but she now had the tools, confidence, and support to face them without fear. The events of the day had left a lasting impression on everyone in the restaurant. The staff had witnessed her professionalism, the owner had recognized her courage, and even the guests had felt the subtle shift in atmosphere. The young waitress realized that she had done more than survive a difficult moment. She had influenced the environment around her, setting a standard for respect, professionalism, and resilience. Her courage,